Hey, what's up guys? So this is kind of how I have my Sony a6000 set up, and I have it similar kind of how I have my DSLR. So like on this one, I have back button focus turned on, so that way when I hit my shutter, it's not going to want to focus in between pictures. I have the beeps turned off. If I press the custom function button at the top, it's going to go into Eye Autofocus, the second custom function. Focus modes, if I'm in manual focus mode, it's going to zoom in. And let me see if I remember anything last minute. I use Photoshop and Bridge, so I shoot in RAW. If you don't have those, I think you'd be okay with just shooting fine. Then for video real quick, I think by default on this camera it was in the middle, but you get more depth and range, I believe, if you're in the top format, the XAVCS. I personally like shooting in 24p. You may notice you get a more natural look. Then 60 frames per second, that's like, you can get started on slow-mo, but for me and videos in general that I do, it looks less natural, so I go with 24p for a more natural look. I think by default on this one, red eye reduction was off, but I turned it on because, you know. And by default, your focus area is in wide, but I have it set to center because I think that one's a little better for me, a little more specific. That way I kind of tell what to do, and I felt like the flexible spot, you get a little finer points, but I prefer center just in case I accidentally bump around the movable one and I want to get perfectly center, and if I'm out and about, that might take a little too much time for me, so I just prefer it center, and I would rather just focus recompose. Then your autofocus illuminator, that's the little light in the front that is going to beam out sometimes to ensure that you're in focus, so it could light up something up so your camera can detect it. And long exposure, noise reduction off to save time between shots. Left this on. So like all the way in the 6th setting, you're gonna see the color space. By default, it's an sRGB. If you look up sRGB and Adobe RGB in Google Images, I believe you'll see a visual on just how much more colors there are with the color space of Adobe RGB versus sRGB. And plus, if you're working with a camera raw, it's going to be way better at editing, pulling colors without losing detail. And for zebras, I have those off by default. I feel like it was kind of distracting for me. Then down here, I have my manual focus assist on. I forget what that even does exactly. But for the focus magnifying time, 2 seconds is actually kind of too slow, so I'm just going to leave it on no limit for me. So that way if you want to focus, it'll stay in that view for as long as you need. And you can zoom in again to get an even finer view, versus leaving it in 2 seconds where it'll just cut off pretty quick. Then to change the settings on what the display button does. So I took off the graphic display, that's the little sign or the little thing right there at the bottom. So I turned that off, and I'm fine with these right here. I don't really need the histogram right here because I have it on in the viewfinder. So when you cycle through the display button, you'll get those options. And then for peaking, I have it set to high, and the peaking color red. I think by default mine was on white, and so I put it on red because I'll notice that more when I'm out and about. To enable a back button autofocus, go all the way down here to the last one on third in the setting, and turn that off. By default it's going to be on, so go ahead and turn it off, and then you can go into, just so you don't forget, go into your custom key settings, and then then it's going to be the AEL button, so click that, and then it's going to be all the way down in a list, so you might not find it right away. Don't be scared, it's going to be like way down here into autofocus on. So now when you hit the shutter button, it's not going to autofocus, you have to press the AEL button to autofocus, and I found that way more handy. Then as for the custom buttons, I have autofocus on up there, it's also going to be way buried in there. So, because that's probably going to be a setting I use more for portraits versus whatever it was on by default. And then custom button 2, I think by default it's just a menu thing, but I have it set to focus mode. Then for my censor button, the way I did that, the way I enabled that was by same thing, going in here and then just focusing all the way down in the list. Go to focus magnifier, that's going to bring up your focus magnifier. And then on the next screen you got the option for the down button, and for this one I turned on the exposure compensation. By default I can't remember what it is, but I have it set to exposure compensation for when I'm wanting to use ISO auto. You go ahead, press the down button, and you could like, you know, just get your exposure compensation on from like right there. Then another quick little tip, if you didn't know, you could go down here, hit auto, then go right again, and you can pick your minimum and your maximum. So the maximum, I want to tell the camera to not go past that, so it doesn't automatically overexpose or anything like that. I think I'm fine with 1600 on this thing. So then I'll have this. Then since I don't want to bump around my aperture on accident by moving it on here, I would set it to right here. But if you're the opposite, you can switch it around to whatever you prefer. Then down here, you get like some more network type options. So I turned on airplane mode because that way it's not going to be always on. And then I think your battery is supposed to last a little longer that way too. And you know these things die kind of quick if you're shooting all kinds. And let's go over here. And I personally like my brightness pretty bright, so I have it set to sunny weather. By default, it's going to be over here on manual, and I don't like that, so come on, sunny weather. And then same thing for the viewfinder. So you're going to look into your viewfinder. By default, I believe it's going to be an auto. You're going to click it and select manual, and then go down into the little options where you get to toggle it all the way up to the brightness. And there you go. And then how to turn off the beeps. You're going to go into audio signals. It's so weird. And then by default it's on. I don't like it, so off. And that should help you guys out a lot because it annoyed me. And then if you're getting this camera used and you got it with whatever settings it was on, Sony fashion, you got to go to setting reset, and then it's going to say initialize. Then you click that, and then it's going to take a little moment to set it up as if it was a new camera from the factory, because I did that because I don't like how the last person left their settings. It was just like as is, but like with some weird tweaks to it that I didn't like. So yeah, so I did that to reset it. And plot twist, I'm using a Canon lens, Canon 50mm f1.8 with the Photo Deox Pro. It's not that pro, it doesn't autofocus in video, but it's still really cool. And I recommend it for the money, it's pretty sweet. It doesn't autofocus as well as it would a regular Sony lens, but for what it is, I really dig it. And let me try and show y'all an example of focus peaking so you guys can see that manual focusness. Yeah, so that's focus peaking right there. Hope you guys found this helpful. And yeah, that was it. Hopefully this helps you guys out. And yeah, look at that shine. But yeah, see ya.